I'm going to cover a couple tips on how to handle a settling crack, and in this case the wall is solid, and normally if you have a crack you'd want to knock loose anything that's peeling or if there's any loose edges, but everything's solid here. We're just getting a little bit of a crack here, and so rather than just cutting this out and putting a lightweight compound in here which actually could re-crack, we're going to cover it with joint tape. And what will happen is once we cover this and compound it with 3 thin coats, it's going to be a perfect fix, and if it cracks again underneath this, the tape is always going to cover the re-cracking. So the first step is we want to embed the tape in about 1/8 of an inch of joint compound. And I'm using an all-purpose joint compound, so it's going to take a few hours to dry, 6 to 8 hours depending on the manufacturer, and this is going to give us plenty of time to work with this. So you want a nice smooth thin coat, about 1/8 of an inch. You do not want to put too much underneath the tape, and then we're just going to embed the tape into the compound, and then we're going to pull off all the excess. So using 2 knives, I'm going to hold it here and work the compound out. You can make several passes, and this little edge here looks like I didn't get enough compound under it, so you can just lift the paper and you can tuck compound under it. And then I'm just going to pull off the excess compound. And you can work a couple directions, and you just want to keep pulling it till you remove the excess compound, and you want to end up with about 1/16 of an inch of compound underneath the tape. And then once you have it embedded, we're just going to put a very thin coat over the top of the paper, and we're going to pull off the excess so that there's not going to be much left for us to sand. And that's all there is to the first coat. So we'll let this dry. There's really no excess, there's no knife marks. We'll let that dry overnight, and then we'll put a second coat on. First coat's dry, so I'm just going to take a compound knife and knock off any particles. And now, using either a 10 or a 12-inch blade, we're just going to put a second coat on this, and you want to pull this out a few inches wider than the tape. And because we've got the molding here from the window, it's a little harder to start, but we can start on one end and just pull it. And any extra compound, you can just go back with your knife and pull it. And I'm going to use this second knife just to kind of rework the compound on this. And just making multiple passes. We just want to put a thin coat. And here I'm going to have to use a smaller knife just to kind of pull this around the molding. And then we can pull it with the knife. So just make a few passes until you remove the knife marks. And here I'll just pull off the excess and just feather the knife again. And what we're trying to do is just feather this out away from the tape on both sides, and we'll let that dry, and then we'll apply a third thin coat, and that will completely disappear. Second coat's dry, and so again we'll just take a compound knife and we'll knock off any particles on the second coat here, and we're going to apply just a third coat, and we'll try to feather this a little further out from the tape, and that should give you the professional look you're looking for. And we'll just hold the compound with either a 10 or a 12-inch blade, and with the second knife you can pull it off the edges and center it again so you don't drip compound. Again, we'll just make multiple passes till we make those knife marks go away. And this is going to feather that compound over that tape. So once you get your compound on, remove the excess from your blade with the second knife, and then just lightly feather the compound. And just make multiple passes until you remove all the knife marks. And that's all there is to it. So we'll let that dry, and in 24 hours you can take a sanding sponge or sandpaper and just lightly touch up any edges that you don't like. But 3 coats of thin compound over the tape that will cover this settling crack, and in the future if it does re-crack again, it'll be underneath this tape and you'll never see it.